Light from Lantern presents
Knit a Spell.
I'm Magical Maker, Katie Rempe.
And I'm the maker of magic, James Divine.
Join us as we stitch together the symbiotic relationship between crafting
And the craft.
and welcome back to another exciting episode of Knit a Spell. How are you doing, Jim?
I am doing great. How are you, Katie? What a month.
I know, right? I'm doing well, coming off of a little bit of a travel situation, which is always fun. So I've actually seen people and been out in the world a little bit. It's very exciting.
Wow. Yeah, that's really starting everywhere, right?
Yep, especially with Pride Month, wrapping up at this point. So
I don't know, is it me or have you seen more rainbow things than ever before? Is it just me?
oh no, I agree.
This idea of less rainbow capitalism and more like queer liberation. And so
Yeah.
that's been a thing where I've been like, okay, there's some rainbow, there's some organizations making their logo rainbow colored that I'm like,
Conveniently only for this month, but why? Rainbow is great all the time.
yeah.
Also very aware of that. Yep. So always good to check on who you're supporting to see if they're always supporting the things that you are also supporting.
That's right. Well, and this year we get a bonus because at least in Seattle, if you're listening in Seattle, we didn't have an in-person Pride. I mean, there was a couple little events here and there, but the big Pride parade is scheduled for October, which is when southern states and warm climates often have Pride because it's cooler, and
Yeah,
it's
smart.
associated with National Coming Out Day on October 11th. So
Oh, perfect.
we will get to have Pride twice.
Yay, the more the merrier. Oh, well, and actually, it's a great little leeway into our topic this week, which is boundaries and spiritual hygiene.
Right. When you're at a big event and there's so much going on, like I think this is one of the things that people who are interested in spirituality, deeply interested in spirituality, tend to have more of a sensitivity to energy in general, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And so what are some of the things, do you ever have like symptoms, if you will, or a hangover from being around a lot of people?
Oh, yeah. Especially like when I would work conventions and things like that. I was purposefully like putting extra into everything. So, when you're trying to work the room or just, when you're caught up in so many people around you, it's easy to just like kind of leak the energy. And then afterwards, exactly like you said, like hangover, just like tired and needing a refresh.
Yeah, that's right. So you would go back to the hotel room after being at a conference. I mean, this is me when I called myself a booth bitch. But
Oh,
when,
yes.
when we would say like when we're booth bitching, right? Which is
Yep.
working a booth at a conference, which I've done lots of times. Even me, the super extrovert, and I know you are a super extrovert. I would go back to the hotel room and crash.
Oh, dead,
Yeah.
zombie dead. Yes.
And did you ever get headaches? Did you ever like after the third day or something at a long conference, like kind of get a little
Tension
headachy or
headache.
anything? Yeah.
Yep, that and by the end, I also would have trouble sleeping because I would need to do like an energy dump. I would actually have like an hour or two before I was able to sleep, where I would be writing notes about people that I saw and ideas that I had, because that also was like a huge bonus of going to those sorts of trade shows, was seeing people and again becoming inspired by their ideas and their wants and needs. And yes, it's just so much going on that it's hard to turn off. It's like overdrive.
Right. So I think you're better than me because I would just go out and have beers with people and like still be all like wee in the
Oh, I did
energy
that
and
too.
then completely crash and be wrecked the next day. So
Ugh.
hygiene, it was hangover on top of hangover.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh, yes, good
Not
point.
good.
Well, knitters love to drink, so I'm right there with you.
I like the blankets. I like the blanket statement. Did you see what I did there?
Yes.
Blanket
Oh, look
yeah.
at you.
Well,
Yes.
let's talk about spiritual hygiene. So, what do we mean by spiritual hygiene? Did you have any ideas about what you were thinking of when we talked about boundaries and spiritual hygiene?
Oh, so for me, I always go to the making side of things. And when I think of boundaries in terms of my making, it's do I have time to do this? Is it overextending myself? Is it doing justice to the project if I accept it? So
Hmm.
for me, the boundaries are usually, am I already too full because I love to take things on and I know that about myself?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's time and effort,
Mm.
are the boundaries you're thinking of, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And maybe it's also the skill. Like, is this something that I know how to do, or feel like I have
Right.
the stamina to do, right?
Exactly. Yeah, you don't want to bite off more than you can chew and then totally
Right.
be frustrated over anything you're doing. That's
Right.
not good.
Yeah, spiritual hygiene, I really think about as well, spiritual boundaries. Let's start with that.
Mm.
I really think about as shielding, wards, but basically it's any way in which you create a limit or a space or a point at which you will not go beyond.
Mm.
And so, what, like, creating spiritual boundaries, and we'll talk about shields, and that's probably the most common thing.
Mm.
And since we've talked about trade shows and like parades and events and concerts, there's a
Yep.
lot of different ways to consider how to do shields. When you think about protecting your house or putting boundaries around your house, there's ways to shield your house and ward your house. So
Mm.
these are the types of things I think about when I think of spiritual boundaries.
Ooh, I love that.
As far as spiritual hygiene, I think of that sort of being defined as how to manage our spiritual status or spiritual like state
Mm. Yeah.
with our regular practice of grounding, like we talked about in previous
Mm-hmm.
episodes, regular meditation, shielding, warding, and release. Whatever the regular spiritual practice is that a person does is
Mm.
part of our spiritual hygiene. And it's that sort of reflection, rinse, repeat type of thing we would do.
Yeah.
Um, and in order to stay energetically and spiritually aware.
Yeah. So the hygiene part is like literal hygiene in a way, like cleaning
Yeah,
and cleansing.
it's a
Yep.
lot like taking a shower so that you're like, okay, is that my stink or someone else's?
Yeah. And actually, I quite often will use a shower like as the spiritual hygiene too. It's just like washing off your dirt and washing off your worries, like just coming back from traveling was like just let all that anxious energy just roll off you with
Yeah,
the drops of the water which are already
that's
doing
right.
it, so it's easy to picture.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
there used to be a commercial for a hair shampoo hair color.
Oh.
And there was a there was this jingle that was, I'm gonna wash that gray right out of my hair.
Yeah.
Right.
That's right.
I think it was from a song that was, I'm gonna wash that man right out of my hair. But this idea of like being able to wash something away,
Hmm.
and psychologically, energetically, and physically, right? So yeah, that's one of the things where they do, why we call it hygiene, is because a lot of times things we do for hygiene can also be mirrored spiritually,
Hmm.
right? You don't just have to take a mundane shower, you can make your shower magical by
There you
also
go.
having it energetically, imagine that you're releasing yourself of what was all over you.
Right.
So,
Yes.
and I think it's important because this past year we've been solitary or in quarantine, and now we're still, and we're going to talk about this for a while, ramping into full engagement with
Mm-hmm.
people. And in some ways the pendulum swing is happening the other way. Travel sites are getting really slammed, we're getting
Oh
a
yeah.
lot of travel happening. Everything is bouncing back because everyone has had cabin fever and is eager to see people and hug
Mm-hmm.
relatives
Yep.
and
Do things.
everything else. Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, we're we're going on a family trip this afternoon, and like off we go for 2 weeks, right?
There you
So
go.
there's a lot of that, and we're just about to have the 4th of July, is
Oh
coming up,
yes.
right?
Gonna be like the
What
roaring
is
20s all over again.
Yeah, so like this weekend is 4th of July, so I'm sure that that's going to be a huge
Big
thing as
time.
we've seen, right?
I remember
So,
last year was like big in its own way. I remember like a million fireworks because people, that's what they could do from a distance. So I can't
right.
imagine what it's going to be like this year.
Yeah. So it's kind of big. So I think it's really important to remember your spiritual hygiene so that
Mm.
you can, as you're exposed to like, wow, I'm suddenly in a room with 40 family members because we haven't seen each other in a year,
Oh
which
gosh.
is something we're planning this weekend coming
Oh,
up. Um, to be able to say, okay, what's my spiritual hygiene and how am I going to manage it, right?
yeah. Very valid, like you said, especially after being by yourself. And I find, even as someone who loves to talk to people, that without the practice that I had constantly before, I get tired more easily or, my thoughts get cluttered. So, yeah, it's a good practice to have now to prepare yourself because it's only going to
Yeah,
get more as the year goes on, I'm sure.
right.
Yeah.
And I mean, when we're coming out of cabin fever,
Mm.
right? It's you said it earlier. It's easy for you to take on new projects, right?
Yep. Exactly. Make the
So,
room.
yeah, but so what do you do to handle that? Like what are some things that are important for you? You know that you say yes to everything, right?
Yep,
How do
exactly.
you discern between yes and no?
It's usually a gut instinct. I know the time I have, and I know typically the time it takes me to make things. And if I don't have the time and it's not something that I can feasibly move things around because, life happens and sometimes you got to sort of work things in. And I enjoy doing that, but also knowing again what your limits are so you can achieve the things you want is really important because when you get caught up or you end up saying yes to everyone else's things and none of yours, then you become resentful of what you're making. And then the thing you're making for someone is then a chore, and probably having some negative energy involved with it, which, even if you don't intend it to be that way, can sneak in. So being aware
Yeah.
of what you really want. And we were just talking about how sometimes that's difficult to know, but taking time to listen to yourself and then decide is really important and very
Yeah.
helpful, I
Yeah.
think.
That's part of the hygiene is really listening to ourselves and knowing, those things, right?
Yep.
And I think about the word balance is really important, like saying yes to things, but we have to know ourselves. We have to
Mm,
be centered, grounded and centered.
yep.
Listen to that episode on grounding and centering so that we can be aware of what's me and what's not me. One of the reasons that I do spiritual hygiene regularly is so that I, in meditation, understand what's me so
Mm,
that when I get a psychic hit or when something is out there, I then know what's me and what's not me, as far
mm,
as is this the person I'm reading and the energy that needs to be for them? Or is this me because I just had a wonderful reunion with my, granddaughter or, an argument with my mom or
mm.
whatever those things are. I can distinguish my stuff from my client. And I think that that's a really important also aspect in spiritual hygiene
Oh, yeah.
because we really want to be able to have those spiritual connections between people and
Right.
have them in a way that's healthy, right? And
Mm-hmm.
the toxicity that could exist there can be shared back and forth. And, whenever you have a toxic person in the room, that really messes up everything. It's no fun.
Yeah.
So
You can
being
feel
able
the
to,
vibe.
yeah, being able to heal that and have some boundaries around it is, I think, really important. You had an idea about 5 people like
Mm-hmm.
closest to you. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I can't remember where I read this, but it had reflected about how your state of mind is often reflected in the five closest people that you have around you. So if you have people who are supportive and encouraging and loving, then you probably are also supportive, encouraging, and loving in most of your daily life. If you have people who are, toxic takers or, always complain or just low vibe energy, you're probably going to share that energy because it's part of your world, what you think is your reality. And it's very easy to get swept up in other people's emotions, especially if you're like us, a little sensitive. And if
Right.
you're not exactly sure where, again, those boundaries are, you can get lost. So then, how helpful is that for other people? Not so helpful.
Right. Think about those 5 people that are closest and choose them wisely.
Yep. How are you feeling? Now see if, the qualities that you want to see in yourself, are those reflected in your friends and family that you have around you? If not, maybe it's time to reassess. They don't have to be your main people. Maybe they're your secondary people.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Your
love
friends should
that.
fill up your cup too.
Yes, I love
Mm-hmm.
that. And I think that, good friends fill each other's cups at the same time, right? That's a really cool
Exactly.
thing.
Yep.
This last sort of thing is I always remember if ever I'm feeling sad or, depressed or whatever, and if I call my mom, she's always going to give me this advice. Hey, is your room clean? Go clean your room.
Oh my
And
gosh. Yes.
right, there's something about cleaning house or doing something like, your room or your house is a reflection of like your mind. So being
Mm-hmm.
able to do a tiny thing that, cleans up a little bit can also be a spiritual act. And we can sort of mirror that spiritually and say, I'm also picking up some mess that I have, inside.
Oh
So,
gosh, yes. As a maker, creative person, I'm constantly in like a flow of mess. It's just my creative way, but I've like had now for about a month where I have every Friday, and that's my desk cleaning day because again, my desk is often my brain literally spread out in front of me. So, when it's overpopulated with things, I can't concentrate on any one of them, and then nothing gets done. It's
right.
always shocking how the beginning of my week tends to be more productive. Imagine that.
Is it more inspiring to see skeins of yarn that are perfectly organized by color and set up and a whole like creative craft space that's perfectly put together? Or is it more inspiring to see it kind of messy and, everything all over the place?
Exactly. Yeah. Way more inspiring to see it neat and tidy and like put with intent again.
Yep.
Maybe it's all by color, maybe it's all by weight, maybe it's all by brand. Who knows? Whatever floats your boat. Yeah, and then you know exactly where it is, and you don't have to be like, oh, well, I wish I could do that thing, but I'm not sure where it is, and now I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, way, way
I
better.
think that's pretty universal, right?
Yep.
In the midst of something, we can feel like we want our mess there because I know where my stuff is.
Mm-hmm.
But man, there's something, but all of your craft stuff is all organized right now because we're just out of Mercury retrograde and
That's
you
right.
reorganized everything,
I actually
right?
really did.
You
I
did.
did.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I went through a lot of things. I wasn't going to start a new project. But I may have rediscovered some yarn that I
Oh
had,
my.
so I didn't feel like it was too bad. It was
I see.
retrograde inspired, so it's the only one I felt like made any sense
It
to do.
was a retrograde inspired starting a new project, Jim. Well, that's how you start a new project is you bring that energy in, right?
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
So,
Great job. Well,
thank you.
so I think that there's a lot to talk about regarding spiritual boundaries. And like we said earlier, I think the biggest thing is this idea of knowing ourselves. And there's this
Hmm.
Greek phrase, know Thysauton, or know thyself.
Mm.
Originally, it was from the mystery cults and different sort of things in ancient Greece and Rome. And it's this idea of knowing that you are not one of the gods, right? That
Mm.
you are a person. But I think that there's something beyond that too, which is to really do know yourself. You are inspired by, you are a child of earth and starry heaven. You are a beautiful being and inspired by the divine. And you also know your limits, right?
Hmm.
Limits don't have to be permanent, right?
Right.
But someone I saw a meme, maybe it was on TikTok or something, that was when you're with a toxic person, they will call your boundaries a grudge sometimes.
Mm.
They'll say that you're holding a grudge because you're actually holding a boundary. And I thought that
Oh,
that was a really interesting
wow.
spin, right?
Yeah.
If you're with someone who's if there's someone in your family or someone that you're in your orbit who's narcissistic or in other ways you have a boundary with
Mm.
them, how interesting it is that they can have it be like that's a grudge you're holding.
Right. The
And
spin
this
that they
is
see.
yeah, right. This is
Mm.
the gaslighting that happens. when really what you're doing is knowing your limits, right? And knowing your own ethics, your own values, right? I
Mm-hmm.
know that I sent you a values exercise, right, to
Yep.
try on and to see like what are the values? What really floats to the top when I conduct an exercise on evaluating myself?
Yep.
So those are things that I think are really important. And that allows us to then know our shadow. Or in other words, the shadow is the unconscious, what's driving us, the sort of unhealed,
Mm-hmm.
constant complaints, constant sort of patterns that run in the background that sort of have us do weird things. Um,
Yep.
and it tells us a lot about where we're learning and where the edge of our boundary is.
Yep. I
So,
totally get that. The ego.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
right? So, there's this idea of knowing what you can see and being able to evaluate what you can see in ways that make sense, and then seeking to discover what you can't see, what might be hidden,
Mm.
right? And this
Yeah.
is the big sort of thing. Now, this seems like a lot of psychology, but I think it really mirrors a lot with energy, right? Because they go together.
Exactly. It's
There's
the
a
emotions, right?
That's right. We say that energy flows where attention goes.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why a lot of times psychology and energy can overlap.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's a you are what you eat situation, you know?
Totally.
Again, if you're negative all the time, everything's going to be negative. But if you sort of spin it around, and it does take work, I have in my life been in both places. I've been easily influenced to get into the gossip mode, and then I'm like, oh no, I don't like that. That's not me. And then you come back, and then people are like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, I like that you're actually complimenting people instead of complaining the whole time. Imagine that.
Right.
Yeah. So finding when you start to do those little things and then seeing what the opposite of it might be is very healing, I think.
Fantastic. Yes, that's such
Treat
a
your own issues.
yeah, right. That's a great thing. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so I mean that's like one way, but how would you use like shielding, or maybe like a little more like what can we give a boost for people?
Yeah. Well, let's talk about shielding. But I think first,
Ooh.
maybe we want to take a little break.
Oh, that's an excellent idea. Hang tight, everybody. We'll be right back. Hey, magical makers. Are you looking for a fun summertime project? Try my No Sweat Mason Cozies, now available in 2 different sizes. You can save 50% on this pattern through July 31st by using the code KNITASPELL, that's all one word, on Ravelry at checkout. These beverage covers not only keep your hands dry, they're also a fun way to identify whose drink belongs to who. Cheers! Hey Jim, let's talk about a palm reading for a sec.
Oh, yeah, my favorite topic.
So, I don't think a lot of people necessarily think of getting a palm reading, but my palm reading with you was awesome, and it actually helped with a lot of preconceived notions that I had of the craft before now.
Oh, you had preconceived notions about palmistry? What were they?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm pretty literal, so I thought having a short lifeline might mean you have a short life, or that a
Right.
star on your palm is bad.
Oh, that's interesting. Both of those are common. A short lifeline does not mean a short life. It actually means a life of connection with the divine and learning and creating type of life. And a star in your palm is a sign of spiritual gift. Those are two things that are dispelled right away. I know there's a lot of things on the palm that people
Yeah,
think are good or bad, right? There's nothing inherently negative in your palm. You can use all the tools, all the markings. They are associated with your strengths, your personality, and things you can use in your life.
absolutely. I really love that modern take on palmistry, and it actually really resonated in my reading. I think everyone would enjoy a reading from you. And, dear listener, if you too would like a fantastic experience that offers insight, direction, and clarity, I highly suggest booking a session with my dear friend James Divine, and you can find more information at thedivinedhand.com.
And we're back.
Woo!
All right. So let's talk about shielding.
Let's do it.
So this is the how to, right? So, like we talked about grounding and centering before, when we ground and center, listen to the grounding and centering episode if you haven't heard it yet.
Yes, please.
Um, that is how we sort of plug in to the universal and unlimited power source that is in the center of the earth and that is in the universe.
Mm.
So once you're sort of plugged in, think of your cell phone. You always plug that cell phone in to charge it
Mm-hmm.
up, and then it allows you to, continue playing, whatever game you're playing on your phone, or doom scrolling, right?
Right. Yep.
So our bodies, we could think of it that way as a sort of analogy that we're
Mm.
plugging in. So grounding puts cords into the earth and branches into the sky or a pillar
Mm.
or whatever works for you in order to sort of plug you into universal energy. So that way you can bring that energy up and it can power something that we call shields. So
Mm.
shields are a visualized and imagined barrier that is around you, and it allows for you to, oh,
That was
hello
pancakes.
puppy.
Sorry. Of course. Hey, 1 second. Let me let pancakes out.
So we were talking about shielding, right?
Yes.
So a shield is using visualization and imagination to see a shield around us and to manifest a shield that is around us. And there is no standard for how a shield could be constructed.
Mm.
There's no standard on where a shield should be as far as how far away it should be from your body or
Mm.
what shape it is, right? So you can imagine, so the way that you can create a spiritual boundary is to ground and center first. Imagine yourself plugged into the earth. Feel the energy of the earth coming up through your grounding, up through your body, and then use that energy to power or to project a shield that's around you.
Mm.
So maybe you want to create, excuse me, a perfectly round soap bubble like shield, similar to Glinda the Good Witch in The Wizard of
Ah,
Oz, right? Maybe
perfect.
that's the shield you would like, right? And it's like this iridescent, beautiful shield. Well,
Mm.
then you can decide how big that bubble is. How far away is it from your body? Maybe you want to pull it in and create like a spacesuit type of shield, right?
Oh.
So it's only if you're at a concert and you try to do a bubble, there's people inside your bubble in your imagination. So that's a little
Oh.
harder. Maybe you want it to be like a skin tight spacesuit, that shields
Oh.
even though it's close to your skin.
Sure.
Um, you can also say that shield can be of any material. Maybe it needs to be a ball of ice. Maybe it needs to be bricks or steel or
Mm.
spikes,
Ooh,
or maybe it needs to
diamond.
be diamond, yeah, or maybe it needs to be mirrors.
Oh.
Maybe it needs to be water, you know,
Oh,
and
wow.
it can also be any shape. So it can come up and out of your head like a waterfall, up and out of your head
Mm.
and around you, washing away anything that's coming towards you. It can be any permeability that you wish.
Mm.
So a lot of times people can set up a shield and say what's for me comes in and what's not for me does not, right?
Sure.
So there's a bazillion things to do and a bazillion
Mm.
ways to imagine a shield around you. All you need to do is ground and center and visualize your shield. Then say to yourself, this shield shall remain. And then you can open your eyes and just start working and experiment. What is it like to have a brick wall shield up when you are working with the public?
Mm.
What is
Yeah.
it like to have mirrors? What is it like to have beautiful like wood carved,
Mm.
or jade,
Yeah.
carved jade, like those ancient Chinese discs that you speak
Mm.
to the
Beautiful.
deities through, right?
What?
You Oh yeah, that's a
Oh, well,
whole
that's
thing.
another episode.
So there's a ton of different things, and you can see like what happens, what protects me, what intention do I put into it. And so
Mm-hmm.
this is one of the ways to create a shield.
Yeah, because I've heard some people say like, "Oh, I don't want a shield because I don't want to miss out on the energy. I don't want it to like totally block me off from everything." And I think you make a great point in saying like, okay, well, maybe start with it being a brick wall. But if you find that's, quote, too much for you, then maybe there's some cracks in it, maybe some like vines are pushing through. And so there's a little bit of more permeability to it.
Mhm.
And maybe that will be more comfortable for you. So it's all
Yes.
about finding the boundaries for you, the balance.
Right, right. I think
Mm-hmm.
of having it like a force field or like a permeable membrane, like a semi-permeable membrane that
Mm.
blocks things that some things can't get through and some things can.
Yep.
And so that's the most common type of shield that I use.
Hmm.
And I use shields when I'm not in my home, because I don't need to shield around my partners. I'll use shields if there's people that come over, they're usually having to go through other things to get into the house.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll shield if I need to. But generally, when I'm in my home, I don't need a shield. But when I go out into the world, for sure, I put my shields up. And a lot of us do that unconsciously. We just don't realize it.
Yep.
So we can do it with purpose and then design and be at cause at how we occur in the world and how we are powerful in the world.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
that's how we can create boundaries, energetic boundaries out in the world,
Mm-hmm.
is with shielding. And I guess you talked about the boundaries of time and effort with crafting. Are
Yes.
there other sort of things that you think about the correlation between or if we were going to do a magical, piece,
Mm-hmm.
how would we talk about boundaries?
So actually, my most recent project that I started, I had this idea, Mercury retrograde, and had to do a lot of traveling, unfortunately, during that time, and to ease my brain and to almost feel like I had something working for me on my side, I decided to design a shawl that encompassed certain qualities that could give me boundaries, like literal boundaries because it's like gonna cover me from like a cold airport or plane, but then also I have certain colors that I'm using, gray and green, because I want them to sort of pass over me. I want trouble to pass me by, and I want some luck. So I'm sort of thinking in those sort of ways, in terms of design, which I'm so excited about. I've never really encompassed so many things in one, but I can tell like this is the future of my design
Yeah,
situation.
you're
Very
actually
exciting.
doing a shawl shield.
Oh, shawl shield.
Shawl shield. We're just coming up with this now. So what's so cool about that is you can imagine your shield being a knit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or a net or a knit or a
Mm,
crochet or any kind of, pattern of cords, because cords are very powerful magically, right?
right.
And you're actually knitting a shawl shield. I mean,
Wow.
that's amazing. Okay,
I
so
oh
is this going to be available? Are you going to publish this pattern on
oh
Lights and
yes,
Lantern?
yes it
All
sure
right.
will. Yeah, sooner than
So
later.
stay tuned. If it's not out already, you will
That's
have
right.
access to that, whatever it might be called. I'm sure
That's
it's not
well.
going to be Shawl Shield.
I mean, it was going to be Traveler's Talisman, but maybe it will be Shawl Shield.
Ooh,
Stay
I.
tuned.
They both have alliteration.
Oh, I love an alliteration. So
I love that. Travelers. What was it? Talisman.
talisman, yes.
Oh my gosh, that's great. And
It's a mouthful.
if I was going to knit that, I guess I could choose the colors that work for me, right? Because if
Absolutely.
it's my traveler's talisman that I want in purple and gold, because I want like all the attention and sovereignty and be treated like a queen, like the queen that I
Absolutely.
am.
Yep. Yep, exactly. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to, actually I was just thinking this morning about how different color combinations could be used for whatever. Just because I wanted to sort of slip by unnoticed doesn't mean that you have to. That's the joy of
Right.
making your own things. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so that's one way I'm sort of like discovering the world of boundaries in making. But the other thing is, when people ask you to make something, and maybe you get this as well with, just palm readings and everything in general, if you don't have the time, you're really not valuing the craftsmanship or your friendship or, the relationship you have with this person. Again, talking like earlier, If you say yes to something that you don't have time to do, then it's going to become a
Or
burden.
desire.
Yeah,
Or you're doing
exactly.
it out of obligation. Well, and
Mm-hmm.
this is where one of the boundaries I have with palmistry is you have to you have to pay for a reading.
Yes.
Like
It's your
that's a
business. You're
really
professional.
yeah, it's a fantastic boundary
Mm-hmm.
that allows me to value my time and effort and have my client value my time and effort, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm going to ask someone to knit something for me, certainly people have given me very generous gifts of
Mm-hmm.
knitting, right? But if I was going to actually ask someone to knit something for me, I would now, especially, say, oh my gosh, that is a lot of work and it
Mm-hmm.
deserves compensation. Otherwise, I need to
Yes.
do it my dang self.
There you go. There is always that option. And if you can't do it yourself, why not patron someone who does it professionally? You probably are a
Yes.
fan of them anyway. Yeah, that's
Yes.
exactly right. Respect your friends enough to pay them for what they're worth. I have
Right.
friends who are artists and have the same issues. Friends want them to do things last minute for nothing, but, how can they become a business while doing that? And their friends, I think, just don't think about it, Um, especially nowadays when
Totally.
art is sort of like maybe just coming back into fashion. It doesn't always have a perceived value, but your
Right.
time
Right.
does. So,
Yeah. Those are some great ideas around boundaries. I also think about like keeping keeping my piece out of prying eyes or having it sort of tucked away. Like
oh,
there's
it's in a
something
shield.
about, yeah, while I'm making it, especially, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I noticed that nobody keeps their finished pieces in a project bag. They only ever keep the stuff that's in process in a project bag. And I'm sure there's like practical reasons, but it's also interesting that that's how a lot of magical work happens is
Hmm.
while it's in progress, you don't really show it or talk about it,
Oh,
right?
interesting.
But when
Yeah.
it's done, you're wearing it or you're driving it or you're living in it, right? Whatever
Sure.
the thing is you manifested or created. And
Oh.
so that was kind of an interesting idea about like, is the project bag could it be kind of like a shield? And
Ooh.
could you actually create, or of course I'm stuck in the 80s with my fabric puff paint, could you fabric puff paint on the project bag some kind of magical sigil or on the inside where it's not seen, right?
Sure. Oh
So
my
anyway,
goodness.
those were
Yeah.
some ideas I was thinking about, like a literal shield for your piece as you're
I never
making it.
thought about that. That you put it in the bag, you hide it sort of when you're working on it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then, gosh, even again, like art and things, I would do the same thing. Like, don't look at my project until it's done.
Till it's done. That's right.
Yeah.
And that's
Hmm.
important for when we think about doing magic. You
Mm.
don't really want to, like, we don't really like to share things until they're done because they're sensitive, they're fragile, they're
Mm.
under construction, right?
Yeah. The energy is easy to manipulate. And so if there's more people in
Yeah.
on it, it can change from
It
where you
can,
might have.
yeah,
Yeah. Hmm.
it'll have everyone else's thoughts and encouragement, but that isn't
Sure.
necessarily like, you know,
Might not be the point
so yeah, and
of
it
that
could be if you
particular one. Yeah.
decided, but for sure.
Sure. Oh, interesting.
So I
Gosh.
think about that, like, couldn't, like, if I'm knitting something on the bus, like, where do you knit your traveler's talisman? Are you knitting it at home by default, or would you knit it in a public place?
I actually wanted to knit it in a public place. Like, that was part of the reason that I wanted to do it. I wanted something to have on the plane with me, which is very unlike me typically. I don't prefer the attention of people who see me knitting. I know that's like wild.
Wait, what
Um,
happens when people see you on a plane?
my grandma used to crochet. And, I'm not like mad at it or anything, but usually I'm like head down, knitting, headphones, and suddenly I will feel like something happening and I'll be like, "Oh, yes." And they've been talking to me for 2 minutes about something that then I'm like, "Oh, hi. Now I'm here. My shield and barriers you are not choosing to see." But yeah, so it's just, I think, one of those things that people have like a really positive um I don't know, like reflection on, they always know someone who was doing something with yarn, whether it was knitting or crochet. So I always get interrupted. And I think that's what I don't like. I don't like the interruption. And then I don't like people picking it apart who don't know what they're talking about. And I shouldn't say that because I do appreciate their feedback and things. And sometimes what they say is really funny without being intended to. But yeah, I do usually am like, no public knitting, just at home. But this project in particular, I was like, okay, this is the one. Again, I wanted it to be like slipping by things, distracting me from what was going on, because I didn't want to think like, oh no, Mercury in retrograde and I have to be on this plane. I don't want to even put that energy out there. So I'm putting it into my shawl, all positive thoughts. Slipping
Yeah,
past, good luck,
fascinating.
no turbulence, like slipping by the clouds, slipping by the people, slipping stitches. Yeah, I got it.
So this is a amazing idea that I mean, I'm so loving this project. I love that you're using the
Mm-hmm.
slipping stitches as, and like, or I think of yarning over, like I'm going to yarn over this person, or I'm going to yarn over
Mm-hmm.
this crowd, or like there's different sort of things that you could actually do magically. And I would only know, the only reason I'm making that connection is because I'm starting to understand knitting a little
There you
bit, right?
go. Yep.
Wow, that is such a magical act to do those things on purpose and say, this is me slipping by, this is me getting over, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
How
Booping
freaking
through the
cool.
crowd. You can't even see me. Ooh. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most
Loved it.
things I think that we knit or that we crochet are actually a shield of some kind. A blanket, a scarf, a hat.
Yes. A literal warming agent against the elements.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right?
Great point.
Or it's
Yeah.
a bikini, or it's a crocheted bikini from the
Yeah. I mean, that
70s.
still covers something. Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, it's been a really interesting idea, and I'm really enjoying having, again, learning more magic so I can put it in. Like you're
Yeah,
saying, you're learning more knitting to see where you can put the magic in. I'm sure we'll
right.
come together on a lot of crossover ideas until
Yeah.
like Katie and Jim's pattern design collection LLC.
Well, the thing that I'm into is the blocking waters.
Ooh.
Like that whole idea that we had talked about in previous with Stardust Fiber Studios and others,
Mm.
where there is this idea of water that you're using to block the piece that's infused with herbs,
Mm-hmm.
potentially essential oils, or whatever types of things that would help lock in or support the intent of your piece.
Yep.
So I could see knitting a a shawl or a scarf with, open roads for travel,
Mm.
right? So it would
Sure.
have this sort of nice, beautiful, sweet, citrusy scent to it, very, very
Mm.
light citrusy scent, as well as having the, energy of that magical oil. And this is
Yeah.
my travel scarf devoted to Hermes, right? Maybe I would
Mm.
do some color work with a little Hermes symbol, you
Smart.
know,
Yeah.
in the end or something like that. So I think
Mm.
about like what a cool idea to create a shield that actually carries me, a physical talisman to travel that
Mm-hmm.
carries me through things and has the intent in there.
Yeah. I mean, I often reflect back on how, knitting is like a chain link, and chain mail essentially. So
Yes.
that's a huge boundary. A lot less weighty,
Yeah.
but a more, modern version of
Hey,
that,
your
really.
your energetic chainmail.
Mm.
That's
Yep.
exactly what I think shields are, you know?
There you go. Energetic
Blocking the
chainmail.
psychic, it's blocking the psychic darts that are thrown at us all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And mostly inadvertently. I'm not trying to paint the world as this horrible place. It's just the people who are pulling on your energy,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
They end up pulling on the shield energy instead of your energy, which is unlimited supply from the earth, right?
Right.
And you're kind of, it's a really important part of spiritual hygiene
Gosh. Yeah.
and
Well,
boundaries in general for well-being.
yep. And you were saying like the blocking water, but I know there's also like spiritual sprays and things too that people use. Again, like a shower and things like that. So
Hmm.
there's a lot of really great options out there, and again, just touching the tip of the iceberg here again. But yeah, I mean, just having these couple of things in your arsenal at this point, I think will be really helpful for people as we, again, continue through the year. And I'm always curious on what people use as their, shields. Maybe we'll get some emails if anybody wants to drop us a line at knittaspellpodcast@gmail.com and describe, if you are feeling willing to share, how you visualize your shields. I love to hear how people do it. We could share it on an upcoming episode or on our Instagram page, which is at knittaspell. And yeah, because
if you have knit something magical that you're using in a magical way as a shield, oh my gosh, we would love to know that, right?
Yes, anything.
You can, if you're inspired by this episode, you can go on to iTunes or Spotify, review this episode, and let us know there too. Anywhere that you can connect with us, yes. I'd love to know.
Yes, please, let us know. And just remember, you can always find us on Instagram. You can find Jim at Divine and Jim on Instagram.
And you can find Katie at Light from Lantern on Instagram.
Oh,
Check out bonus material and all our episodes at knittaspell.com.
That's right. Oh, man. What a wonderful episode.
This was so fun to talk about all this stuff. You are so inspired with...
You inspire me, Jim.
Happening. I see magical making is actually happening.
Yes, it's becoming a thing. I know. I'm so excited. I really hope we get some emails from people, even if it's just a DM. Slide into our DMs on Instagram. That works too.
Totally. Yeah.
So yeah, we're anxious to hear from you guys. So yeah.
Well, exciting, Katie. I can't wait for next week, and we will see you then.
Absolutely.
Thanks everyone for listening.
Have a good one, everybody.
So long.
This episode is a wrap. If you enjoyed what you heard, go ahead and follow us on your favorite podcast streaming app. And don't forget, you can see full video episodes of Knit a Spell on Light from Lantern's YouTube channel.